Melanie, roll call.
Roll call, Councilmember Bolin,
Here.
Councilmember Colleton,
Here.
Councilmember Lang,
Here.
Councilmember Lasson,
Here.
and Mayor Crowder.
Here. Well, good evening and welcome, and thank you all for attending. We'll go to item 2A, consider adopting resolution number 202567. Mark, you want to present, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Crowder. Good evening, Council. Good evening, community. Thank you so much for being here for a very important meeting for the Paradise Sewer Project. If we haven't met before, my name is Mark Maddox. I'm the Public Works Director and Town Engineer for the Town of Paradise. I've been with the town since 2012, and in some form or fashion been working on this project since that time. It's my great pleasure and joy to serve on this project, but it's also been one of challenges. One thing that gives me some solace in that, though, is that the town has really been working to deliver this project since its incorporation in 1979. And tonight, I can confidently share, along with the recommendation of the community, that we've never been closer to a constructible project. So with that, the presentation tonight is intended to overview the project as well as the alternatives analysis effort that we've undertaken over the last 7 months. Recap briefly our previous public meeting on July 24th, and then at that meeting a lot of comments were shared, and those are so appreciated. In the presentation tonight, we're going to address some of those comments that haven't been previously addressed, and then also provide an opportunity for additional public comments so that the community can be heard again before the council deliberates and provides potential direction. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And we'll start at the end with that in mind. So after the full process, and we'll kind of share what this means, but the alternative one outlined in our agenda summary packet is the one that is fully recommended unanimously across our ad hoc committee. That committee is comprised of 2 council members, including Mayor Crowder and Council Member Lang, as well as representatives from Paradise Irrigation District, town staff, and consultant support as well. The recommended alternative is really broken out into 3 major components, as with any complete treatments or a complete sewer project, which is comprised of collection, treatment, and dispersal. So our recommended alternative is a hybrid gravity and septic tank effluent pump, or STEP, collection system with an aerated lagoon treatment and land discharge to a percolation and evaporation pond. And I can say right now that this is the most affordable, basic, reliable alternative available to us. The project would serve the downtown core where growth has lagged. It will optimize operational costs and ratepayer burdens. It will serve the project mission of being fundable and affordable, permittable, scalable to meet the needs of Paradise today and into the future. Our funding secured for this project at this point is $84.8 million. And right now we're estimating project costs at $114 million. And we understand those 2 numbers don't pencil out, and we'll have more information in this presentation on how there is a path forward. So at this point, Council has also given some direction to consider redirecting funds to reach a constructible project now to that end. So let's get to the collection system first. As I mentioned before, a hybrid gravity step sewer concept really involves gravity trunk mains along Skyway, Clark, and Pearson at full build-out, because that's our major objective, not just to serve this initial phase, but to serve the ultimate build-out of the project. And then with low elevation areas and individual properties connected via on-site step systems, which can be retrofitted with some existing tanks if they're usable, and be compatible to make sure the overall construction cost is minimized as possible. This is the most compatible solution for Paradise. Step systems on individual properties and low elevation zones. And again, like I said, retrofitting existing tanks if they're in good condition is a possibility. This version of the project replaces small grinder pump stations with regions connected via step. So again, a lot of the discussion with the community has been step versus gravity. And what we're really happy and excited to share is the alternative with the best of both worlds. The main trunk lines would be installed at shallower depths, and I'll have more on that here in a moment, than the original gravity design. And a phase 1 project would prioritize the downtown, wouldn't require any central lift stations. So this is the slide where we show the ultimate sewer service area. If you've been following the project since 2012, you're probably familiar with this graphic. The area shaded in black is the ultimate build-out scope of a potential sewer service area. The area for phase one, conceptually, which hasn't been finalized, is shown in the smaller area in the orange. And you'll notice here, it's really intended to be foundational to build up and build out to serve more properties. Phase one is not the end for this Paradise Sewer project. In fact, it's just the beginning. So to get to and summarize the previous approach and the evolution of this process and hearing your concerns and comments and desires to see the most affordable, constructible version of this project as possible, a lot of evolutions have occurred. And one of those, most notably, is the evolution from gravity only to a hybrid solution. So this graphic, while it kind of outlines that it's the previous approach, I want to start by kind of picturing, this road as comparing it to a 3-layered cake. And instead of a cake, we're looking at a road. And so when you cut that road in half, you're kind of looking at it from this perspective. And the top layer of that cake is really going to be your road surface and your utilities, whether it's the undergrounding of electric, telecoms, or water facilities. Those are going to kind of be the most shallow as possible. And what we were thinking with a gravity system, a 100% gravity, is that the mains would be installed on the bottom layer, on that 3rd layer right against the plate. And so with this evolution of the project to look at a hybrid system, it allows us to install the gravity mains shallower in that middle layer of that same cake. So that allows us to really optimize the project to ensure that the needs of existing properties are optimized, as well as new connections. One of the goals of this project is not just to serve the homes and businesses that are operating today, but it's also to incentivize new development and reconstruction, especially in our downtown core. And new connections and private developments, they do want a flush and forget system. Having the requirement to have on-site systems when it's not necessary is really is really not the direction that those developers want to see to come to Paradise. And so with a hybrid solution, you'll see this pipe from the previous slide is higher. And that allows for new construction to not raise their finished floor elevation, or the existing home is lower than the engineering trunk depth. What that means is that the orange, being gravity, if you're higher on the higher side of the street, your entire flush and forget system is in place. If your home is lower and lower than that shallow gravity main, you can have a septic tank effluent pump that would connect to that same gravity main. And the really key, point here is that whether we're doing a full pressurized step or a gravity hybrid system, is the depth of those mains are going to be in that same zone, that middle layer of the cake, and that saves money in constructing this project. So if you're looking at a different solution where everybody's higher or the new development wants to raise their home or raise their business so that gravity works because they don't want a tank to maintain and still pump every 7 to 10 years, or to have issues with backup power and relying on the small pumps, they could elect to raise that floor and have a gravity connection to that gravity main. But in areas of town where maybe even Sierra Park or Bushman Road, if that were able to be connected, those are pretty low. And so with this approach, it would allow the whole collection system of that neighborhood or those individual properties to be connected via step. And so that 100% is a great evolution of the public process participating in this project and making it better. And so when gravity doesn't make sense, we'll go ahead and do the step connections for everywhere it needs to be. And the decision on whether it needs to be or not is driven by an engineering decision about how shallow can we install that gravity main underneath the first layer of the cake or the utilities. So that's really great, and I'm excited to share that. Now moving on to the next component of a complete project, the treatment. Aerated treatment lagoons and ponds are the most simple and cost-effective solution from an upfront capital perspective, as well as an ongoing operations and maintenance perspective. It's simple, less operator experience is required, it's less sensitive to smaller and inconsistent flows, which we will obviously have. It does have the largest footprint, but the facility sizing really depends more on the hydraulics and the amount of the water flow than the solids and carbon content and would not change significantly between either a step, gravity, or a hybrid of the two. This can expand or repurpose the ponds to scale up, and it could produce water for agricultural use and disinfection if that was the desire and funding was available to do so. Here's just kind of a conceptual layout of what a treatment facility might look like. You'll have headworks and intake and equalization ponds in different components of the treatment process, but really a series of ponds that ultimately ends in a land discharge area where that water is disposed of through ground percolation, which we're all used to with our leach lines, or evaporation, which obviously is going to be, on days like today, really great and beneficial for the project and simple and free. So from there, the permit renewal, and we'll have more on that a little bit this evening, but permit renewal is required every 10 years. Again, this is the easiest project to permit. We expect to need to meet low total nitrogen limits of less than 10 milligrams per liter, which is great. Typical permit requirements include quarterly groundwater monitoring, and then our preliminary estimate for that pond or that land discharge application is only 5 acres, but the total site for the 0.1 MGD system, including the growth that we so badly need and desire for Paradise, is up to 100,000 gallons per day, or 0.1 MGD. So let's get to the public input. Again, the intent of these next couple of slides are to address the comments we heard here, the comments that we heard through meetings that were requested, as we promised, that if 3 minutes here at a council meeting isn't enough, you could come in and meet with us here at Town Hall. Or submit your questions via email. We saw that too. And so our goal here is to go through each kind of one with major topics, and we're not going to duplicate the same questions, but really intended to cover the feedback we heard between last month and today. So our first meeting was with Richard Harriman. He's a public interest attorney in Butte County. He wanted to suggest us to partner with property developers for project financing or utilize the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Loan Program, or IBANK. IBANK loans typically average about a 4% interest these days. And considering, also he wanted us to consider updates to our general plan, which is also underway, to include requirements for development financing of the sewer service. And our general response to this meeting, and we're grateful for Richard Harriman and participating in the project process, that will absolutely take the sewer project into consideration, his recommendations into the general plan, and that as the town plans to use state and federal grant funding for the capital costs for phase 1 of the project. But really our goal here is to reduce the amount of debt and financing as possible, and so that's our overall goal, because every dollar financed is a dollar that has to be paid somewhere, whether that's the town of Paradise or the individual ratepayers. Blaine Stone, a community member here in Paradise, met with us to suggest a secondary treatment in modular reactors that can be prefabricated and delivered to the site. We looked at a lot of those, especially with MBRs. Modular treatment systems can replace some of the treatment lagoons. Our committee response is that secondary treatment systems were indeed considered in the facility alternatives analysis evaluation and are not ultimately recommended to move forward for our alternative. Next, we met with Tony Brandy. Tony and his wife are property owners in Paradise. They discussed potential land availability for treatment facilities off of Clark Road. This site has been improved with excavation and is currently being used as a temporary dirt processing facility off of Clark. And on that note, our response to Tony is, again, gratitude for participating in the development of the project. At this time, no decisions have been made about where a treatment facility could be sited, and that those locations will be identified in the subsequent programmatic environmental impact report that's required after direction is given on this project, if it is given. And then obviously there will be a public comment process about where that site could be, whether it be Clark Road or other sites. Our next meeting was with Melissa Schuster and Matt Ball on behalf of the Butte County Mosquito and Vector Control District. They really wanted to meet with Paradise to ensure that we were leveraging the experience that they've seen operating, controlling vectors, and specifically mosquitoes in Paradise and Butte County. They recommend avoiding certain types of riprap that can be breeding grounds for mosquitoes, and that ponds can instead be constructed to limit mosquito growth, and we are in agreement on that. and that other agencies have successfully designed facilities that are easy to mitigate those concerns. We are aware that if not properly controlled, that the district could provide daily fines in extreme instances if the mosquitoes are not properly managed. We share the desire to partnership with the Mosquito and Vector Control District into the future on this project to make sure that whatever solution we do, wherever it goes, that it's done so in a way that's safe for the public health of the community of Paradise. So next we met with Dave Anderson. Dave is a general engineering contractor and has experience installing sewer main pipelines, lift stations, and step systems. He agreed that gravity is the ideal solution, but also suggests a step for a lower cost for the collection system and can be easier for installation in his opinion. He suggested continuing looking at step as a potential bid alternate for construction due to the potential cost savings from pipe depth, diameter, and installation type. He also suggested locating the sewer pipeline under the sidewalk to avoid PID and PG&E utilities in the roadway. And our response is that, again, gratitude for Dave and the participation on the project, and we will continue to examine ways to optimize the project implementation costs, even considering bid alternates as much as possible, and utilizing STEP in the low-lying elevation areas in Paradise to achieve this goal. Okay, so now I'll kind of cover just like the broad themes of some of the Q&As we've had over the last couple of weeks. The first is the construction duration of 2027 to 2029. This includes and kind of really addresses the critical path in front of us. Is time is definitely of the essence from a community recovery perspective, but also from a funding perspective. And so when we get direction on whatever version the community would like this project to look like, we have to really get started on a subsequent environmental impact report. That process can take 6 to 12 months. There will be right-of-way and land acquisition required. That can sometimes take 12 to 18 months. Thankfully, those two things can happen in parallel, but it really does push out the ultimate date that we can start breaking ground and start getting water to flow downhill. So with that, we have design budgeted for this effort, and then really we forecast 2 years of construction for the project. Disruption to businesses during the construction is a huge priority for the project and the community. We all recognize that operating a business in Paradise is a challenge no other community has really ever had to face, and that's absolutely not lost on this team and this community to make sure that when and if this project does move forward, it's done so in a way that recognizes the needs of community businesses to operate and be successful and make sure their businesses are accessible during construction, that their construction impacts, those acute impacts, are minimized and forecasted, and we can predict and coordinate calendars. And so those are major priorities as the project goes forward. We do know that regardless of the type of collection system, I mentioned there will be step connections and there would be gravity connections in this hybrid approach. And whether it's step or gravity, that most of this trenching, and if not all of the trenching, is going to utilize open trench construction methods. And that's really going to have the same impact to those businesses and individual parcels. And so our goal moving from here forward is going to work and partner with each individual business and property owner to make sure that A, there are no surprises, and B, that the work is done so in a way that recognizes your needs and is optimized as much as possible. The only way to get through this project without any impacts is no project. And obviously we know that that's not an ideal or viable solution for Paradise. So next, there's been some broad concerns about the operations and maintenance burden of large pump stations versus a small step or septic tank effluent pumps on those individual parcels. So our proposed and recommended alternative includes the hybrid, which would minimize the number of central pump stations. And as I mentioned before, that initial project may not have any central pump stations just because the elevation fall from Elliott Road down to the south end of town kind of takes care of a lot of the hard work for us. And that's really a good point to make, because if we don't have to go step, the conversation is kind of, well, why would we? And what would the benefits over this be if everything else is about equal? And so that's really great to see that we're forecasting very minimal, if no, major pump stations in alternative one in that initial service area. As far as the operations and maintenance concerns of the step being due to more smaller pumps and maintain rather than fewer larger pumps, which is obviously a valid concern. And I mentioned about the power redundancy too. If there's no power to those individual pumps, that can ultimately be a problem depending on the length of that outage and the capacity of your tank. Other communities with step systems have been successful, including some within Paradise. We absolutely do want to recognize that. Even Paradise Unified School District and other businesses have to come up with some solution because there is no other alternative in Paradise at this time. Our themes that we've seen, that STEP is best implemented in small communities with less than 100 connections, newer installations, but they have had increased operational challenges with more connections and older systems, and that's really something we should be aware of moving forward. Additional public comments, including the treatment plant location being a concern and what that selection and process timeline would look like. The treatment location selection and land acquisition would be forecasted in 2026. The location alternatives will be part of the subsequent programmatic EIR, as I mentioned before, and that'll have robust opportunities for public review and comment. Our funding for this project, and we are so grateful for it, the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funding does prevent property purchases before the completion of our subsequent EIR or NEPA process. And so the ultimate reason behind that is to make sure that no choice limiting actions occur, no reduction of the options in front of us occur before this environmental review is done. So you can kind of start to see how important these next steps are and how urgent this project is. Purple pipe, a lot of discussion has occurred prior to the council meeting in July and then through this last month, and we really did want to take a moment to clarify that purple pipe absolutely has a role and a place in successful and thriving communities, especially when you have customers and demand for that purple pipe and funding to install it. A lot of misconceptions, though, can occur when you kind of dive a little bit deeper about what are the true requirements of purple pipe. And based on the California Code of Regulations, this does still require, because you're achieving a higher standard of treatment than what we would be proposing in the aerated lagoons and evaporation ponds, is, again, we're trying to keep the treatment costs as low as possible so that the effluent can, or the treated wastewater can evaporate or percolate, is if we look to reuse that, that increases the treatment requirement. And so especially if public access or involvement, or if anyone is going to be near that treated wastewater delivered through purple pipe, it has to meet those standards to do that. And so with that, the distribution of purple pipe has to happen in a separate trench than the collection of the initial wastewater itself. So picture the collection system that we're talking about, reaching from the individual parcels and going to the central treatment facility or any version of treatment facility, and then another distribution system. And so that kind of doubles your infrastructure, which can increase your project costs, especially being that it has to meet minimum clearance requirements away from potable water. That's really critical. And so we have a 1-foot vertical and a 10-foot horizontal clearance requirement on that purple pipe between potable water. So on a cost-constrained project where we've already pared it down from best case scenario, completing the entire sewer service area 8 months ago at a much higher cost, that we're really just trying to achieve the minimum objectives. But I'm really happy to report that no part of this project precludes us from using purple pipe into the future, especially if funding becomes available. With that in mind, we're absolutely supportive of any fire risk and reduction projects, buffer zones, or areas that can receive this treated wastewater at the higher standard into the future, but it does increase project costs, and those are funds that are currently not available to subsidize our initial efforts here with phase 1. Oh, thank you. Great question. And so purple pipe is after the treatment process occurred. Okay, so I'll say for those watching online that the question was, what is purple pipe? And I apologize for not stating that up front. Purple pipe is the color of pipe. It's actually purple. That after a wastewater treatment process occurs at a very high standard to where the sprinklers can go off on a golf course or a park field, and we can trust that kids running around or people interacting with it, that it's safe for that area and those people to be near it. And that water is delivered in a purple pipe that's post-treatment process. And so the water from PID goes in, the water from the home goes out to the treatment facility, and then purple pipe goes from the treatment facility after it's done with its process out to somewhere. And as you can imagine, in Paradise, that somewhere is very difficult to find and is probably very far away from wherever this treatment facility could be. I'd absolutely love to see risk reduction and fire cannons to help suppress any approaching potential buffer zone project or wildfire risk. But the impacts and the requirements from a capital cost and maintenance, when you look at storage of we can't water fields in the middle of January or March because they're saturated. So you have to factor in those types of things when you're looking at beneficial reuse. As an aspiring environmental engineer myself at Chico State, 20 years ago, looking to improve the environment, I'm all about beneficial reuse and reducing environmental impacts. Unfortunately, when it comes to the actual project like this, those types of amenities come at a significant cost, especially when you don't have the customer demands immediately adjacent to your treatment facility. Okay. With that, next public comment would be directional boring of sewer service lines will save time and money. First and foremost, I'm very familiar with directional boring, and it was really great to hear from the expertise provided by Paradise Irrigation District serving on our ad hoc committee to really validate that directional boring in Paradise is not necessarily faster nor less expensive than open trench construction, especially at the required depths that we're talking about. Directional boring is not practical for most of Paradise due to the rocky ground conditions, but then also the subsurface utilities. The amount of efforts you have to go to directionally bore doesn't mean you can dig a bore pit, which is where you start, and then a receiving pit, which is where you end. And so you still have two big holes to dig to make this directional boring. And then you can't just kind of wing it. You have to really validate where those utilities are, and the only way to do that is to positively locate them using potholing techniques where you expose the utility line, measure the depth, and make sure that your bore is lower than that depth. Well, if you do that and there's uncertainty about where utilities are and uncertainty about the rocks you have to avoid, you're really going to run into a situation where it would have just been cheaper to open trench cut this whole thing. And so PID provided that feedback, and we're grateful for the idea to do directional boring where possible. It's our recommendation and our experience at this point in all of the geotechnical work and utility verification work in Paradise that directional boring will not save costs on this project. Okay, one of the next questions was about cost of treatment for septic effluent only versus traditional municipal wastewater. Septic effluent only does decrease the solids, but it does not significantly reduce the soluble organics or nitrogen. The treatment facility sizing is driven by water flow, not solids content, and the primary clarification is typically not needed for small systems, such as what we're discussing. Next, and again, we're kind of tracking close on getting to past the public comments and presenting some more information about the project and next steps. Pressure reduction for a fully built out low pressure step system. It was a comment added that we could add pressure reduction because our hydraulic analysis on a full step system says it's actually technically infeasible due to the elevation drop from the top of town to the bottom. What this means is that pressure reducing valves are not typically recommended for wastewater, a great solution for potable water, but when you're using wastewater and having pressure reducing valves, that can create some O&M issues. The risks of failure are increased and include sewer spills or backup into homes. That's a very valid concern in operating a fully built out, fully pressurized step system. We're very familiar with all of the undergrounding and excavation in Paradise about unintended utility digs. I certainly do not want to be responding to an unintended utility dig into a pressurized septic tank only system. With that, kind of in summary, pretty simple. More moving parts equals more points for failure. So when we let gravity do its job, it can really help us reduce the overall project costs, especially when it comes to O&M. Additional comment was about STEG system, the feasibility of a STEG system, and STEG stands for Septic Tank Effluent Gravity System, with septic effluent, still having a tank on site, only into a gravity collection system to reduce the need for minimum velocities in those collection system pipes. I know we're getting a little technical here, but in Paradise's topography, the pipe depth in a fully gravity sewer would be driven by the need to capture low elevation users, not by minimum velocities. So reducing the solids in these gravity pipes would not necessarily reduce the pipe size. And that's really important because the pipe size does factor into the project cost. So whether it's STEP or STEG, we do understand that it does require equipment to be maintained at every parcel, increasing the overall O&M cost. Oh, I did accidentally skip a slide, so bear with me here. So one of the, and I'll say the major concern is how is this project going to be paid for, and what are the financing options, and who's going to pay what? So we want to help kind of calm some fears and address what's possible here moving forward. So one of the themes was addressed that the project cost per parcel served. Our objective is for the initial cost to be entirely funded with grants. I talked about financing. That's really not something we're interested in as a staff, as a council. I can't speak for them, but I've heard that theme as well. And I mentioned earlier about the more, really the goal is to see development into the areas that are not recovering as fast as other areas in Paradise, and adding burdens, whether it be through an assessment district or through a loan, to reduce those costs per parcel is really counterproductive for the overall goal of the project. So operational costs and the ratepayer burden, a lot of folks really do want to know, and so do we, about what is the rate structure going to look like for a hybrid collection and a simple lagoon system. But what we can say, even though we don't know what that looks like, we have some information about how we can assure that the recommended alternative is the lowest operational cost alternative that it can be discussed and approved and permitted that is still scalable for the ultimate build out of the town. A few years ago, the town council did commit to a subsidy which would, again, reduce operational costs. It says 5, but actually for the first 10 years at a rate that really is aimed, and I'll have more on this in a moment, to keep wastewater treatment costs in line with market analysis. No one's really going to be interested in paying hundreds of dollars a month to see this project go in. And so what option, if the council wants to affirm that, one option is to affirm the plan for the rate subsidy or the O&M assistance program, where the idea there is the town invests its own money into the recovery of Paradise by subsidizing individual rate structure. And so what that will allow is for the utility to be established, and then as the utility is established, it is going to create growth and have more customers. And then so as more customers come online, and we can assure that the lowest cost alternative is selected for operations and maintenance, that break-even point where the assistance and the subsidy for O&M rates is no longer necessary. So with the other option I mentioned, formation of a special district, not conducive to stimulating growth, and then cost escalation, a lot of concerns, and we'll have more information on this through the presentation. Construction cost estimates were escalated at 5% per year to 2028, which is the estimated midpoint of construction. All right, so moving right in, that's a great segue to the Phase 1 capital cost estimate. So this is some information that's duplicative from the July 24th, but a lot of it is new because at the previous meeting, we presented the range of different project alternatives that each had their estimates. Within these estimates, and the goal of this project is to never end up in a situation where this project is underfunded into the future, and so that really puts the onus on this team and the work going into it to make sure that our estimates are accurate, and that is absolutely critical. So with a project at this stage, it's really common, in fact expected and normal, to establish estimates that within reasonable ranges. The phase 1 project estimate that we shared at the July 24th meeting showed this column here on the right that is what is labeled at the high estimate, and the total project costs of $114 million. What I want to share is that the estimate range of how we are forecasting and looking to overall budget and account for this project is to use the high estimate for all decisions moving forward, but understand that a lot of engineering expertise, construction industry expertise, and thought has gone into that the cost could come in as a range. Some will come lower on the high, or some will come on the low end of this range, and some will come in at the high end of this range. But it's really important to us to make sure that the increasing costs and the changing dynamic of this economy and construction costs, that this project is not outpaced. So with that, the low estimate cost for this same project is $90 million. But for us, in estimating this project, we're estimating $114 million for the purposes of finding that upfront capital funding for this project entirely through grants, and forecasting that these are the numbers that we want to beat and come in under. On that note, I want to dive a little bit deeper on the line by line, because that actually is a lot of lines, and that the reason why we have so many different lines when it comes to the different components is to make sure we're representing kind of the all-in costs of the cost of the project from today, if we are to move forward, to the construction being completed and the first connections made and water flowing again downhill. Is that there's different cost components. There's engineering design and pre-construction costs, kind of where the zone of work that we are looking to resume as quickly as possible. We have a low estimate, a high estimate, and the basis of that estimate is that you factor in a 15 to 20% of the construction value based on industry metrics. The next component is the town costs, staff augmentation, including environmental, legal costs. There's really solid estimates there, and factored in to complete through the design plus or minus 20%. Real estate acquisition, I mentioned earlier, right-of-way, land acquisition, those absolutely going to be required for any version of this project. And those have been properly estimated by using a parcel-by-parcel metric from HDR and the right-of-way estimating team specializing in our project. Environmental permitting and agency costs, thankfully, this cost has gone way, way, way down from what the previous regionalization effort was considering. We no longer have Butte Creek to go under, Union Pacific Railroad to go under, State Route 99 to go under. This project becomes a lot more simpler when we're doing it here in Paradise, and that's great. So what's reflective of that is the environmental permitting. And again, with that as well is the mitigation requirements. A lot of projects, including this one, will have some impacts that need to be mitigated, and there are costs to do that. So this estimate was generated from HDR's environmental team that is based on the reduced project scope and anticipated impacts of mitigating the environmental impacts of having a local version of this project. Next is the construction of the collection system and the wastewater treatment and discharge method. So the low estimate is about $44 million, and the high estimate is $51 million. This includes the equipment, materials, installation, labor. It's based on independently reviewed estimate from Mountain Cascade. Mountain Cascade was part of the team that was brought on as a design build team for the town of Paradise. And so there's a big difference between Allison and I here estimating a project and someone that's going to build it for the agreed to price, and that's what Mountain Cascade was helping us develop. Using those numbers of an agreed to price or a probable agreed to price, we use that to help us forecast and estimate what the actual real world cost will be for this collection system. So that was used to handle that. And as I mentioned, that construction cost has been escalated 5% per year through 2028 at the midpoint of construction. Our estimating contingency includes 20 to 30% of the escalated total per the AACE estimating guidelines. And then our construction bonds, insurance, general conditions, and profit, about 25 to 35% of the total, including contingency, is based on industry metrics. The wastewater treatment and discharge construction, that's estimated between $16.5 and $19.3 million. And so my hope in sharing this is to show that for the purposes of budgeting this project, we are estimating conservatively high and conservatively accurate. And so that's really good news. The last couple of components are kind of some more behind the scenes layers. Engineering services during construction. When we're building any project, you're going to need to rely on some of your design engineering team to make sure that we can verify, is this really what you intended as the construction team is asking some questions? And if there's opportunities to optimize the design and make little pivots, we need a team to be able to verify the original intent, make sure the stamp still applies on approving the work, because that is definitely important for the project. And that kind of comes out of this bucket for the engineering services during construction. That's been estimated at 3% to 7% of the construction value, again, of the collection and wastewater treatment project components of this estimate. And then construction management and inspection. This isn't something that we can just say, right now, go. We need to make sure the expectations of the community are met. We need to make sure the expectations of the project are met. And so we have to have a team that's qualified and experienced in providing that service. And so that's estimated and included in this budget at 6 to 8% of the construction value based on our industry metrics. On top of all of that, we are also estimating a town contingency for things that change. This isn't necessarily the construction contingency we talked about earlier, but it's really just a general project contingency that can handle that there are going to be changes in costs, the things that we can't predict with what we know today. So with that, we've added a 10% of the construction phase costs, including construction and the engineering services during construction and the construction management phase. So on the low end of that estimate, it's $6.6 million. On the high end of the estimate, it's $8.1 million. And it really does aim to factor in that during construction, there will be changes. There will be things that can't be predicted. Again, utilities encountered during construction of the main or the laterals. There are going to be things that just happen. And the contingency is really well suited there to help address those things. So to kind of recap about what this estimate includes, it includes the hybrid gravity collection system, and that's a ground-up estimate using unit cost developed by a contractor for this project in Paradise, considering the local geology. It includes PVC gravity mains and manholes for gravity zones and PVC pressure force mains for step zones. It includes service laterals from the main to the property line for all parcels in the service area, and it includes service laterals from the property line to the structure for all properties in the service area with existing structures. New step, tank, and pump systems and power service supplies for all existing structures in step zones are also included in the budget. While I mentioned earlier it would be great to retrofit existing tanks, for the purpose of this estimate and the spirit of being high and accurate, we're forecasting all the tanks for the step connections to be replaced. This does assume open trench construction for all piping. It assumes to meet town standards for pavement restoration. That's absolutely critical for us. We're very grateful for the funds we've been able to come behind the undergrounding of Paradise. And it's absolutely disappointing to see this project have to come behind some of these roadway repaving efforts. But with that in mind, we are here, and we have a commitment with the standards that we enforce on all contractors and all utilities in Paradise, is that if you're constructing into a road between 3 and 10 years of its original construction, that you're going to have a higher requirement for the pavement restoration, and this project forecasts that in its project costs. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of potholing and utility verification needs to take place regardless of the alternative selected, and those costs are included. Traffic control during construction is also included in this effort, and that is a very labor-intensive and costly item to forecast. Moving on to the treatment and dispersal facilities. So this includes on-site buildings and laboratory, influent pumping, the headworks, the clay line ponds with aerators, nitrification and denitrification reactor, on-site water service, solids thickening and pumping efforts with the drying beds, electrical, instrumentation and controls. I've never heard of INC before now, but instrumentation and controls, and then site work and miscellaneous piping and metals and concrete. the effluent discharge pumping and ponds unlined at this point. And so this estimate, though, does not include aesthetic improvements. That's a really important factor, such as large berms, wetland plants, or habitat. And it does not include disinfection facilities that would likely be required for that higher treatment level I was mentioning with the purple pipe. This assumes that the discharge ponds are not publicly accessible. I mentioned earlier, and we actually saw successful applications of discharge ponds that are publicly accessible. That is only possible because they have more investment into their treatment process, and so they have walking trails. That's great. With this estimate, the level of treatment at this point assumes that no public access will be granted because of the goal of getting this project done at the most affordable price for Paradise residents. Okay, so getting back to the committed town rate subsidy on how this project can work, O&M and capital, those two things are critical. On the O&M side, on August 8th, 2023, again, almost 2 years ago, or just over 2 years ago, Town Council conceptually approved a rate subsidy plan. This plan establishes a potential average rate near $85 per month, targeting about 2% of the median household income, and that's a really common metric for grant funding programs that we were pointed to through actually the United States Department of Agriculture when looking at their opportunities for grant funding and loans. This O&M financing assistance would establish an upfront operating reserve of $1.2 million, and it would commit $526,000 annually for the first 10 years of the utility's operation. So that would come at a total cost of $6.46 million, and the source of that, again, would be the town's own recovery and operations project reserve fund. The town has set aside a certain contingency of its general fund reserves for projects, and in August of 2023, the council made a formal declaration to our funding partners and to the community that it's important for us to make sure that any version of this project has affordable monthly rates. So in the lens of this revised project, this is something that absolutely would be revisited. And from my initial review, it's potentially possible that the requirements, because of the alternative we're selecting, has a lower operations and maintenance cost than potentially what we were looking at with a broader service area, that this same amount of funds might be able to go longer in case those funds are needed. So it would need to be reviewed and revised, especially once the big decision about what the funding picture looks like to have a fully funded capital project. So let's review what that actually looks like. This is a familiar slide for folks that have read the agenda summaries or who attended the last meeting. But essentially, we wanted to come up with a really clear way of communicating the secured funding, funding opportunities that are pending, and then additional funding pursuits into the future. For the purposes of this project, waiting for additional funds at this point that are not imminent or highly probable is an endeavor that could jeopardize the overall viability of this project. And so that's why the ad hoc committee has elected to really power forward with a project that's constructible soon as possible, while these one-time funds are available to us. So with that, we've secured $30 million for the design phase, and that's the type of project funding that's helping support this alternatives analysis. That was done through Housing and Community Development at the state level. They're the administrators for federal funds that come through as a result of our disaster. So anytime you think CDBG-DR, think federal congressionally appropriated funds that follow through HUD, Housing and Urban Development, go to HCD at the state level, and then go to the town of Paradise. And without these funds, the design funds or any of these other infrastructure allocations through this program, we do not have a viable project at this point. And so we're really, really grateful for all the legislators and the officials that have helped support the town meeting the needs of our recovery through these funds. So I mentioned $30 million for design. At this point today, out of our overall allocation of CDBG-DR funds for infrastructure improvements, that was a $200 million allocation 2 years ago that is going through a diverse set of projects, including $35 million for the sewer, but it's also funding other capital projects like improving Pence Road between Pearson and Skyway, widening Skyway between Billy and Wagstaff. And so there's projects in those that are also moving forward concurrently with the sewer, but out of that allocation, $35 million today is budgeted towards the Paradise Sewer Project. We're also grateful for a community grant made possible by Congressman LaMalfa that's being administered through the Environmental Protection Agency at the federal level. That's a $1.75 million grant. That's being retooled for this local version of the project, but that still falls into our secured funding category. Next, through the state and the Water Board, we are extremely grateful for their verbal commitment to a Clean Water SRF grant to the tune of $28 million for the next version of this project. But we're also interested and excited to advocate for Paradise's needs and know that that original, if we go back to that initial service area where the area in orange is pretty small compared to the area in black, that we want to serve more customers and have this project benefit more of Paradise. And so our intent to continue to partner with the Division of Financial Assistance and the State Water Board is that our needs are not just $28 million. And so we are really look forward to submitting a complete construction application with the revised project, if that's the direction we're given. And we will continue to communicate that we have additional needs, and if they're partnered on this project quickly, we can expand that conceptual service area, have more areas in orange. Next, I'll move on to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, 219. It's a special environmental infrastructure program that, thanks to Congressman LaMalfa, we've been able to authorize, keyword authorize, $50 million towards the future of the Paradise Sewer Project. What's really critical, though, is turning an authorization into an appropriation. And as we are all aware, that process at the federal level is very, very difficult. And so for the purposes of constructing this project as soon as possible, the way we think about these U.S. Army Corps 219 funds is really about a potential phase 2 that could bring on additional customers to Paradise. At this point, we don't have any secured funding that has been appropriated from this funding source. So to combine what I've shared about the project costs and the funding secured and shared at the top is that the funding shortfall between $114 million and the funding secured of $84 million, there is a need of $30 million at this point. But you can say also, we are going to continue to assume the high end of this project cost, and we are grateful for the $84 million attributed to the project at this point, and there are no plans for an assessment or local contribution from town residents to design or construct this project. All costs are intended to be covered by state, federal, and grant funding, as in addition to the town's local funds for O&M. So as far as the shortfall, kind of one of the big themes of the last meeting is, well, how is that going to happen? And so we really have 3 options, and I've kind of already eliminated 2 of them. But we can wait until further notice for more grant funding opportunities, whether it's to wait for more opportunities to help us build Purple Pipe or to serve more properties, but that cost of waiting might be significant because a lot of these funds, especially the CDBG-DR, do have an expectation with a performance period that can't just be continuously extended or expected to be so. We could take loans to finance the project shortfall, and that could be repaid by owners, repaid by the town. But really kind of the only option at this point is to take a step back and look at this reality that we're in versus the reality we were in 2022 and 2023 and assess our CDBG-DR infrastructure allocation priorities, where I mentioned some of those road projects are funded out of, to consider increasing our allocation to the Paradise Sewer Project. So I explained briefly, I'll dive a little bit deeper here. That $200 million allocation supplements a lot of different projects throughout the town. It funds our matching requirements on all of these new roads for repaving. And so most communities receive grants, and we've received many, have a 25% match expectation. These CDBG-DR funds are making sure that those funds actually are not the responsibility of the town. And that's just been amazing to help us. I think it's almost $23 million of matching requirements to deliver these recovery projects funded by CDBG-DR. But on top of that, I mentioned the Pence project, the Skyway project, a traffic signal at Skyway and Pence, and then constructing Row Road between Edgewood and Clark Road, and that's currently in the allocation plan. I already told you about the funding and how it's delivered through HCD, and we are extremely grateful for this ongoing partnership. And they've helped us modify the priorities of this allocation now total 3 times since it was initially approved by the Paradise Town Council. And what I'm really excited and confident to share is that their commitment to Paradise remains, and including today, and the very difficult decisions that are before us. So with that, a potential reallocation, there's really a few options, and I do have some information that's going to supplement what was published in the agenda summary to really address some of the concerns about the impacts of this really critical decision. But if you've been engaged in following the Road Extension Project, you could look at that, especially Phase 2. When I say Road Extension Project, it really does mean a new road. It's not necessarily an extension, especially when you break out the phases, but really it has a major objective of improving safety, evacuation, circulation, ultimately between Pence Road all the way to Skyway. But it's broken down in phases to try and address the critical needs, especially highlighted by the 2018 Camp Fire, to provide circulation benefits between Pence Road to Clark Road. But if you attended the environmental scoping meeting, a lot of verbal comments were made. There's definitely been some project support too. I really do want to encourage that evacuation safety is critical in Paradise, especially in this area. But this meeting, for an environmental scoping meeting, and I know some of the attendees are here tonight, it was very, very important for us to understand that putting in new evacuation routes creates a whole set of complex issues, including the neighborhood. And that's 100% important to us, as well as the broader issues of the community needs. But when it comes to this project, we've been searching for additional funds because the cost, like everything else, has increased. We've submitted 2 applications to the Federal Department of Transportation through a program called BUILD, and then it was raised, and now it's BUILD again. But this funding application was denied for $25 million 2 times. And so at this point, the funding we have available for Road is all the funding that we're likely to see in the near future. And so this slide really does outline kind of the phasing concepts. And so when we talk about the project between Clark Road and Pence Road, there's a lot of different alternatives. And I'll say, for the development of this project, that no decisions on alignment has been made because it itself is in its own environmental impact review process where public comment is considered, and we seek to tool the project to be the least impactful as possible with the highest benefit, and looking at neighborhood impacts is part of that, and then also exploring the different options for different alignments. And so this graphic before you outlines Phase 1A, 1B, and Phase 2. The best way to think about it is that Phase 1A is between Edgewood and South Libby with a connection to Sawmill, and Phase 2 is to continue from South Libby and make a connection somehow to Clark Road. So when it comes to a potential option, and what was published in the agenda summary for funding reallocation, is to really take a step back and understand if the priorities of this community is the Paradise Sewer Project above all else, that there is a path to make this reallocation and add $36.7 million to the project to cover that $30 million gap. What that would look like in this version is suspending the Road Phase 2 project, which would free up $52 million in C2B GDR. And we could then supplement the Phase 1A between Edgewood and South Libby, and to make sure that that's a viable project with all the construction increases that we've been seeing at $25 million total. This could fully fund the Oliver Curve Phase 1 project. We've heard from the community that Oliver Curve is not safe, and that something should be done to construct pedestrian facilities from Skyway to Valley View at a minimum, with an ultimate goal to connect to Billy Park. So this reallocation could supplement that project to take it from just design only funded to bring it to a construction reality by adding $12.3 million. And I mentioned the overall net frees up $36.7 million in funding for the Paradise Sewer Project. But freeing up $36.7 million for the sewer project has significant impacts to funding elsewhere that is not flexible. I mentioned C2B GDR. Think a flexible recovery program tooled for us, really. When you look at LTCAP, which stands for the Local Transportation Climate Adaptation Program, those are funds that come through the California Transportation Commission that were competitively awarded to the town of Paradise for Road Phase 2 to the tune of $33 million. Through this program, we were the highest scoring application in the state because the needs of Paradise and evacuation safety are so great. But if we were to suspend the Road Phase 2 project, the town could have to deobligate those funds and return, and I say return them because that's a really easy way to understand it, but we actually don't receive the funds until we spend it. It's a reimbursement program. But deobligate means, essentially to say thank you, but no thank you, where our priorities have shifted, and this award is really great, but unfortunately, the project is not moving forward at this state. But I really want, and that was what was in the agenda summary, but I really am grateful for our team and the community expressing, very strong concern that deobligating $33 million to the state for the benefit of $36.7 million for the sewer project is a really tough choice. And so what I really want to say tonight, when it comes to this discussion, the best way to think about it is if we move forward with a reallocation plan, is that it means $36.7 million to the Paradise Sewer Project and it's fully funded. From there, on what happens if council gives us direction to move forward, it will be absolutely making every effort as possible to maintain, retool, revision that project. And so what that could look like is if we abandon the original scope of the project of Road Phases 1A and 2, that frees up $72.2 million. And I know this is a lot of information. I appreciate you bearing with me. But it's really important to identify that there is a really positive light in this potential alternative. And this could allow us to create a new scope and limits for Road Phases 1A and 2 to the tune of that $72 million, put back $35.5, and then still supplement the Paradise Sewer Project at $36.7 million. And then here's the big if, though. And what would be the priority of staff and our teams in advocating for the project is to ensure that this is a balance and our recovery is evolving. And it has evolved heavily since we were awarded these funds. And we would ask our funding partners at the California Transportation Commission to help us be creative, to help maintain these funds for the town of Paradise and look at some sort of retooling of this project that would require an approval, and I'm imagining a very special approval that is outside the existing guidelines of the program. So I don't want to share that this is a guarantee at all, but it's certainly a possibility, especially in our experience in advocating for Paradise and meeting with U.S. senators and meeting with state legislators, and to see that a lot of folks are looking for their way to participate and help Paradise, and I can't rule out that this is a possibility. So what that would look like is that we would need to engage on potential scope changes to this project and really cut it down to the bare bones for Road to remove the bike path, remove the amenities with a goal to only construct a 2-lane roadway along the corridor with limits to be determined, whether it's from Edgewood to Clark or something in between. I can't even imagine. There's a lot of different possibilities, but we know that there is a significant need for investment into that area to improve circulation. So I really do want to modify the recommendation tonight to be this alternative, to where we don't necessarily give up and deobligate and tell the state that thanks but no thanks, but that we want to engage and deliver the Paradise Sewer Project independently, and then work this issue further and report back until, I've said it this week, until we hear maybe 2 or 3 no's, and then keep escalating this issue until it's a complete no, that we can't retool this project and keep those funds here in Paradise, really achieving the best of all worlds for this project and the Paradise Sewer Project. So if that were to be approved, the railroad, I can't even say phase 3 because this isn't even that. The kind of second vision of what railroad could be would have a budget of $70.3 million under this program that still fully funds the Paradise Sewer Project. Okay, so I've already covered the purposes of establishing the project direction. We've assumed a total project cost of $114. We can safely state the town has secured 84. If we advance the concept of retooling the infrastructure allocation program, that'll add $36.7 million to the sewer. And so with that, we can work with the California Transportation Commission to retain the $33 million retooled for the railroad project. And then the sewer funding program goes from a deficit of $30 million to a surplus, which is a great place to be, because then we'll have another layer of contingency on top of contingency upon proper estimating. So with that in mind, if those contingencies aren't needed, what that means is we could continue to serve more parcels in this first phase. And more parcels means more benefit, means more flow. The project works and recovery can keep moving forward. So getting back to the same version of the slide is, regardless of what happens with Row Road, with this version of direction is that we can safely say that $36.7 million going to the Paradise Sewer Project helps us deliver a constructible project, which in the lens of history, I can't say that we've been closer in the last 20, 30 years than we are tonight. So if this all goes forward and moves beyond this alternatives analysis phase, the goal is to hit the ground running, and we've got a great team to help us do that. Begin the subsequent EIR, bring on a treatment facility designer, resume our funding applications, get the letters of support we know that are so needed and available because this community is so wonderful in coming together to help advocate for our needs. From then, the goal will essentially complete environmental right-of-way design, get to construction as quickly as possible in 2027, and finish this thing in 2029. With that, it's really important that there are project approvals. I've mentioned the CEQA process and the subsequent EIR, and I've got a little bit more information on that. Tonight, we're looking for that direction. None of the direction given, if it is given, really is deciding anything about Row Road or the funding picture, but we're really seeking for that direction so that we can engage with the CTC, so that we can engage with HCD and all of the acronyms participating on this project to make sure we have a viable project, and we'll be able to provide more information as it becomes available, with the goal of potentially ratifying in September at our regular council meeting, to where we can report back after receiving direction. These are the impacts, and then we have the formal go, no go moment in September. So with that, we're looking from there, award design contract for the treatment facility, as I mentioned, approved construction contacts. There's so many different checkpoints for the council involvement and community involvement on how this project will go. And then a lot of questions came up, well, when do you set the rates, and when will we 100% know if it's $85 a month, or maybe a little lower, or a little bit higher based on information that's developed over time on the O&M side. That process will occur. It is required for setting the utility rates, but it has to occur kind of after all of these other things are done first. And then through that process, we will notify all the affected property owners and conduct a public hearing, and the property owners would have an opportunity to submit written protests in that rate settings structure. Okay, wrapping it up on the environmental approach. We are prepared to start working on the subsequent programmatic EIR, incorporating relevant elements of our prior EIR by reference, which means focusing on the analysis and the incremental changes to the analysis and leveraging all of the work. I really do want to take a moment to acknowledge there's been so much work over the last 10 years, but especially the last 4, that still has value, and we get to use that moving forward. The input and comments received during and prior to that CEQA process will also be considered. Even input received during the regional sewer project environmental impact report requested consideration of the local option, so that's super valuable. I remember being here in different forms of the project and hearing feedback about wanting the local project. Well, that's going to help us get through this EIR as much as possible, because we finally are here and prepared to deliver that. In addition to the no project alternative, the town is also looking at several locations for the proposed wastewater treatment plant. A detailed analysis will be included for each site that's selected. And then we're going to continue to maintain our project website and have that be up to date. And there will be opportunity for public input after the public draft EIR is released for a 45-day public review period. So the environmental forecast on that effort would again begin as soon as possible this fall and winter. Spring of 2026, we'd be looking at regulatory agency coordination and consultation, circulate the programmatic EIR for public review. We'd have that public review period in meetings, finalize it in the middle of next year with NEPA clearance expected shortly thereafter. Then summer, fall of 2026, we'd look to certify the CEQA document and then really get going on the permitting. Okay, so closing slide again, same, almost word for word, it's really important to me to emphasize why is this time different, and it's really because we have the most experienced and capable team. We are closer than we've ever been. Even, sometimes talking with this project with my own kids, and I say I've got a sewer meeting tonight, and they say still. You're still working on this project, and that's true. But this time is different, and I tell them, and I'll tell you, this time is different because we're closer than ever means we know more than ever. We've ruled out the options that are possible but not feasible. Regionalization would have been great. Operating a treatment facility is not easy work. Regionalization has its own benefit, but that's ruled out at this point because we need to do something today with the world that we live in and the funding available to us. And so with that in mind, we are closer, we know more, we have a great team behind us to help us deliver this project. We have funding partners committed, and they are looking and seeking the confidence in the community to support this moving forward, and so we're really grateful for that. We've committed to a rate subsidy. We've chosen and recommended an alternative that cannot be undercut is finding a cheaper option to do this and achieve a municipal wastewater discharge permit. That is really, really important to understand. With that, we have the full support of the regional board, water board for our local option. And that I really want to close with that further delays. I can't emphasize enough that time is of the essence. Every week, every day matters on this project, and further delays on this long, critical path has the potential to jeopardize these one-time funds. And I said that last month, and I'll say it again, that there are no replacement funds in sight to this scale to deliver this project. And so I remember a headline a few years ago, now or never. It's really kind of now or never at this point, especially with the funds that we've been able to secure for the community. So with that, we've got a couple of things. We have action requested. I'm going to leave this slide up because tonight we're really asking council to adopt a resolution that concurs with the ad hoc committee's recommendation to provide this version of the project, a hybrid collection system, aerated lagoon wastewater treatment, and using ponds for the effluent discharge. We're looking for direction to immediately commence and resume efforts to advance the project forward through environmental and design activities to the maximum and most efficient means feasible. And last, we're looking for direction for staff to bring back formal revisions to the town's CDBG-DR infrastructure action plan, which provides additional funds to the Paradise Sewer Project's first phase, as well as coordinating with impacted funding agencies for action implementation. So with that direction, we'll be able to really explore what does the CTC staff say about this allocation, what does HCD feel about the support of this proposal. And so with that direction, we're able to formally engage and bring back the impacts for the community's consideration. So with that does end my presentation. I want to thank you again for your time being here this evening. And I'm really excited to open up for public comments again. But before we do that, I do want to take an opportunity to ask Mark Sulik to come forward on behalf of the ad hoc committee. And if you could, Mark, in front here, introduce yourself, your background and role and experience with the committee.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Turn this around here. Okay, hi. My name's Mark Sulik. I'm a board member for Paradise Irrigation District. There are 5 board members. I'm one of 5, so I represent you, the community. It's your water district, right? And the board operates similar to the town council. We make the decisions for the water district. So why Mark invited me to speak is that I had a career in wastewater treatment. I was in wastewater treatment for over 35 years. 25 of those years, I was a manager of a wastewater treatment facility, treatment plant. And I got notes because, at my age, you got to write it down or else it doesn't happen. So, but, as a former manager of a wastewater treatment plant, I experienced many challenges. And some of those challenges were the expansion of the treatment plant. So in 25 years as a manager, I went through 3 treatment plant expansions. And I'll tell you, it's very difficult to run a treatment plant in the middle of an expansion project. It's just like the roadways here in town. We're trying to drive on the road while they're while they're fixing the road or improving the road is it's difficult, as we all know. And as a member of the ad hoc committee, you know, I approached the town's sewer project with an open mind. I tried not to have any preconceived ideas of, you know, what should they build. And I was impressed, and I appreciate how the town actually approached this project with an open mind. They basically went back to square one. And we're looking at all the different alternatives, and Mark, of course, explained some of these alternatives tonight, and they came up with this decision. The best thing, in my opinion, that occurred on the ad hoc committee was going to all the local, and I'm going to say not so local, treatment plants to actually, you know, visit them in person and talk to the operators, because the one thing that you'll glean from an operator is the good and the bad. They're very honest and forthright, and they'll tell you exactly what's happening and exactly what they think about their own process and their own treatment facility, the pros and the cons. And that was very valuable, I believe, for the committee to hear. It was totally valuable for me. It was an eye-opener for me, even though I have all this experience in the field. So, and I do want to thank the town and the council, Mark and the council members, for allowing PID to be on the ad hoc committee, because it shows the spirit of cooperation, and you know, we wanted to be a party to this project, so to speak. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much for that. There were three of us on the committee: our president, Bob Matthews, and our district manager, Kevin Phillips, and myself. We were us three representing Paradise Irrigation District on the ad hoc committee. So there were three things that we at PAD agreed that we wanted to see for the sewer project. And those three things are: it needs to be affordable. The number one, need to be affordable. And that's, you know, Mark spoke to that obviously with all the numbers he's presented, and like he said, you know, we as citizens, I'm a citizen as well, obviously, we need to be able to pay our sewer bill, you know, when that day comes. So the second thing is the project or the treatment plant or the system needs to be expandable. And that's very important because, again, like I said, I went through 3 treatment plant expansions in 25 years, and each one of those was, you know, 2 to 3 years each. And so it's very important to be able to incrementally expand a treatment plant or a system as, you know, more connections come online. In other words, as the town grows. So that's a very important feature. And then the third thing is it needs to be permittable. And Clint Snyder is here from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And the Water Quality Control Board is what they administer all the wastewater treatment plants in the state, basically. And so any project you have or any kind of system you have has to be approved and permitted to operate. And so you can't just find some kind of system that's unproven technology, you might say. So it's great that, you know, Clint has been participating in the ad hoc committee meetings remotely, and it's fantastic, I think, to have that kind of support. And so, in conclusion, we at PID, we support the direction that the town has selected on this project. And we back the project, and excuse me, let's see. Yeah, we also think this is the best solution for the town. So that's all I have. If anyone has any questions?
Well, we'll get to questions here in a minute, but I just want to say thank you so much, Mark, and I appreciate your input and expertise on the committee. Next, I'll introduce Clint Snyder from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Thank you, Clint, for being here in person tonight.
Turn it this way to speak to all of you. Not you. No. Good evening, everyone. My name is Clint Snyder. I'm an Assistant Executive Officer with the Central Valley Water Board. I manage the board's Reading office. Sorry about that. Again, my name is Clint Snyder. I'm one of the assistant executive officers at the Central Valley Water Board. I manage the board's Reading office. The Central Valley Water Board's the largest of the 9 regional water quality control boards in the state. We go from the Oregon border down to the top of the grapevine. So we have 3 offices: Reading, our headquarters in Rancho Cordova, and our office in Fresno. I've been involved, with Mayor Crowder and some past council members, and now Member Lang, your staff, for since 2018, right after the campfire. We've had the pleasure of my staff. We're involved in hazard tree removal, hazard debris removal activities. We're still involved in a lot of timber operations, timber harvest and salvage operations in the area, and some other activities. So we're here a lot. I want to applaud the council for the approach they took. Clearly, it was unfortunate that the regionalization approach just landed in the way it did after 4 years of a lot of really hard work and quite frankly, really impressive work to land that project at a time when the state budget deficit is what it is. And then the estimates combined with that just made that project infeasible. But the retooling of the council and staff was equally as impressive. In about 6 months' time, probably a little less, to be able to retool, regroup, put together the ad hoc committee and a roadmap for how they evaluate a local discharge and treatment system option and right size or scale the collection system was pretty phenomenal. We spent a lot of time through that ad hoc committee talking about different treatment alternatives and the pros and cons of surface water discharge versus land discharge on a number of those facilities. And I think that was a great exercise because I think where the town has landed, at least staff's recommendation, is a really solid one in that it's very basic. It's like driving an old Ford truck without all the bells and whistles. You don't have to worry about the windows, electric windows breaking, or the rear slider, springs falling off, or any of those kinds of things, right? It's just the tried and true. We permit, thousands of these things within our region and across the state. There really isn't a lot that can go wrong. We understand these facilities really well. They're easy to plan for and really easy to permit, and the O&M costs are really low. So I feel pretty confident that the recommendation the staff are making tonight is in your best interest, and that it's something that the water boards can not only permit easily, but it's something that you can grow with in terms of adding, additional bells and whistles as time goes on and as funding becomes available. We talked about purple pipe and Title 22 water and recycled reuse. All of those things can come later as the town continues to grow and as other funding opportunities come available. So I'll leave it with that, but I certainly support the recommendation being made tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Clint.
Clint, I want to personally thank you. I mean, you're right. I remember the many meetings when we were going to go down the hill and you making the trek from Reading to either Chico or Paradise, and many meetings. And, here we are 7 years later. And I just want to thank you for sticking with us throughout this long project. And we really appreciate your help. So with that, we're going to go ahead and open public comment. We're going to do things a little different than we do at a normal council meeting. There are no cards. There's 2 microphones. So if you line up at each microphone, and we'll alternate. So come on up and ask your questions.
Well, if nobody else wants to be first, I will speak. I'm John Stonebreaker, and again, I live outside of town limits, but I still have a stake in the recovery of the town. I want to see the town deliver a project that will bring commerce back to our ridge. And I want to say that I do think you are over-speccing all of this, that the emphasis that's being made on it's now or never, this is when we have the funds available, doesn't exactly mesh with the idea that someday we're going to take this all the way up to Skyway and Pence. If you look at the progress over the last 5 years, over the last 50 years, I mean, it could be 50 years from incorporation until Paradise flushes its first turd. So it will be quite a time before You add all of those that were hoped to be added in the sewer service area in 2017 or in the regionalization project. I also have some quibbles with the slide's dismissal of the STEG system, that if you had the small diameter gravity sewer, then you could use 3-inch Schedule 35 PVC instead of whatever you'll be needing for the primarily gravity poop line. So also, you wouldn't need manholes. There are ways in which this could somewhat decrease the initial outlay. So I'm going to quibble that this price cannot be undercut. I do support scaling back the Row Road, Clark to Edgewood plan. I think that's a good reuse of the funds if the state is willing to go with that. That I understand that the town has lots of money that is specifically for sewer, and lots of money that could be used for other infrastructure projects. And we don't want to see too many of those other dollars reallocated to this more than are necessary. So I have a lot here, that I think that the project can be somewhat simplified, that a lot of the problems with the pure step system don't exist in the STEG system. I think that Bennett Engineering in 2017 was mostly right, and the ad hoc committee's recommendation is mostly right. And the one modification that I would ask, the direction to give staff, is that the environmental impact report considers as one of its alternatives, not just no project, but also a small diameter gravity sewer as one of the options. And I don't know that I'm right. I don't have the experience that Mark Sulik has or that Clint Snyder has. It might be that that's not viable. But I'd like to be able to see that analysis and then give comment whenever it has been written up, whenever the expert engineers have looked at it in more depth. That's all. I do hope that this succeeds. I want to see commerce brought back, even if it's just to this small section. We want to see that happen. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bill Sherritt, been a resident since 1974. I'm on the school board committee. I want to thank you guys again for doing what you have done. I think you've done a great job in a short period of time. I just have some probably quick questions that you can possibly answer for me, hopefully. Did I hear that the system you can opt out of? Is that what I heard?
Mark?
Yeah, so what I can say as far as decisions on connections and requirements to connect is that nothing has been decided. With that in mind, I can paint some themes here of what I've heard, and that would ultimately require a consensus of the council, is that to deliver an upfront project with the entire capital funded is going to try and incentivize initial connections on day one as much as possible.
Yeah.
We understand the investment into existing recovery and buildings that have been built since the 2018 Camp Fire have new septic tanks, have new step systems in some cases, and that those could sustain possibly until they fail, and that if those facilities failed, then that would probably be a good time to connect. But at that time that those systems fail, those incentives might not be available to connect and have most of the project costs on the individual property side be paid for through these programs.
So then, if you opt out, you're looking at an increased cost essentially down the road?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Sorry. So the EIR report, I don't, understand why it takes so long to get that done. So again, being part of the school district, we pushed hard to get everything done sooner than anybody ever thought we could. I'd love to see you guys push to get that EIR done, because that's going to speed up the whole thing. I don't know, how you would go about it. I can try to think of something, but maybe you get a different company, maybe you get two companies doing it. You do one here, one there. I don't know, but it seems that is stopping the whole system from getting started. And in the school district, we asked for pity from the state. We would go through DSA through the state. We asked for them to push our projects to the forefront. I'm not sure where you guys are with that. We did real well until it came to Paradise Elementary School. They took forever for that one. But I don't know what avenue you would go to try to increase that EIR report, but I think it needs to be looked at really hard. what side of the pipeline, what side of Skyway is the pipeline going down?
Yeah, I can address that, Mayor, if you'd like me to. At this point, an alignment of the actual main has not been selected. Part of that process is the utility verification I mentioned earlier, and locating the laterals, locating the mains, looking at as-built that are available to us is going to help us properly design the side of the street, or if it's in the middle, or if it's under the sidewalk. All of those options are on the table for this main.
Now, are you gonna bore underground to both sides then, or how's that gonna work?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the presentation, at this point, in our experience and the recommendations of our partners, is that open trenching is going to be the best method for this project, especially as we look to make that gravity main as shallow as possible, and those laterals, whether they're gravity or step, as shallow as possible, is that open trenching is really going to be the most certain and cost-effective path for us forward.
So then Skyway's gonna have open trenching across the
Correct.
street.
Yep, and so with that too, we are forecasting the proper pavement restoration techniques to make sure that Paradise at the end of it, yet another construction interval, is left with great roads.
Okay. Don't like that, but nothing I can do about that either. As far as your committee that worked on the sewer situation, like I say, I'm very happy you guys started working on it again. I'd like to see it continue till the project's done. That's what we do. I've been on a committee that meets twice a week for 6+ years, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. You know, I'd prefer that you guys stay with that committee and make sure that all the things that are supposed to be done are being done, and get a progress report. That's what we do with our architect. We do that with our contractors when our projects are going, which they've been going forever. So that's just please do it if you can.
Time.
Oh, shoot. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Cliff Jacobson. I'm a concerned citizen of the town of Paradise. As you vote tonight on this attempt to solve our wastewater issue, I would ask that you keep the following in mind. Our problem has never been how to get rid of our sewage. It has only been how to get rid of our leach field effluent. I feel bad that in our effort to say we finally did it, we are ignoring the real issue. The term STEP has been used to confuse the public by the very people who were hired to support us. The presentation on July 24th, it was informative, but also misleading. I realize that in 2 minutes tonight, I don't have the time to go into all the details of the report that were, in my opinion, out of context, exaggerated, or outright fabrications. I'm left with the question of why would they do that? If at a later date anyone on the committee or the town staff would like to go over the report with me, I invite you to contact me, and I'll be glad to discuss it in detail. Now, I know that the ad hoc committee's best intentions were to try to come up with a system that was cost-effective and timely and with minimal disruption to the businesses in our town. I realize you're not professionals when it comes to something as complex as this issue. In the report presented in that July meeting, at the end of the report, there was a heading title, and you brought it up again tonight. Why is this time different? The first sentence says, we have the most experienced and capable team to deliver the project with the insight and knowledge from professionals who have built these facilities before. You said that. I have one question. Isn't this the same group of professionals that failed us already? We can't afford a full sewer system, and it's not what we need. We need to put in an effluent-only collection and treatment facility to solve the only real problem we have, leach field effluent, not full sewer. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff.
I always have lots of questions. My name is Liza Whitmore. Family moved here in 1956. I moved back in 2007 after leaving when I graduated from high school. Families lived here all these years. We are on a septic system, obviously, with plenty of leach fields. We're all the way over on Pence Road. The likelihood that we will ever be connected to the sewer is highly. Nonetheless, and if I'm a person being downtown and so on, questions. Are only the affected parcels going to pay for being connected to the sewer? Or is this going to be somehow filtered in with PID? No. Okay, so only if you're connected to the sewer will you pay anything towards the sewer?
That's correct.
Gotcha. How expensive would it be to retrofit an existing septic tank?
Yep, as far as estimates that we've heard, it can range on parcel to parcel. It depends on the condition of the tank. We do know that a brand-new system can range in the, $3,000 to $7,000, depending on some of the issues on that individual parcel. That's some of the feedback we received in one of our tour stops in North Auburn.
So in your saying that the subsidies from the town would extend out about 10 years, as we're talking about the development of the town coming back and increasing and so on, you have a number of parcels in your initial phase area which have nothing on them, but probably do have serviceable septic tanks on their property. So I was just kind of wondering, how much it would cost in case that person decided that that made sense for them. Hopefully they would still be building within that time frame of being able to get that connection subsidy from the town. But after the project is built, then those connections are no longer, like you just answered to the gentleman here, that cost would no longer be paid for by the project, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if you'd like me to elaborate on that question. One of the topics you hit on, which is new, is the project being completed and a vacant parcel looks to develop. At that point, the council could take direction or could change code to require connections upon new development, with an ultimate goal of more connections, improving the groundwater, more ratepayers to help turn this project around, and then also unlock the potential of that development project itself by connecting to the sewer. So I hope that addresses that question. Is new development post-project completion may not be likely to utilize old septic tanks and leach fields, is that a connection could be required with that new development process.
Okay, and again, when you say new development, one kind of thinks multifamily, big business or something like that. I think also about the individual homeowner who is going to build just their house and then also is going to have to do that. However, when you go into building any new house anywhere, you're still going to have to put in a septic tank, blah, 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 and all those expenses anyway. So just kind of wanted to get some idea a little bit more about that.
Yep. And I'll just add one point. The goal with the project I mentioned, the laterals will be installed to vacant properties up to the property line.
Right.
And so it'd be really advantageous for that new development, whether it be a single-family residential or a multifamily project or a restaurant, to have that lateral stubbed out and ready. And so if you're building a new home with bathrooms and kitchen sinks and so on, is that you just run that pipe out to the lateral and then you're connected with no infrastructure required, no leach fields required.
Yeah,
If
I
you're
heard
not,
that, and I thought
unless
that
you're
was
using
smart.
a step connection, which is still possible.
Yeah, build it out. You did mention in one of the slides that if the step becomes problematic in greater than 100 connections, so what happens when everybody's connected in the whole project?
Yeah, that point there is really referring to that the communities that we discuss is that they're really meant for communities that are smaller, are really restricted where gravity isn't possible. STEP is a great solution for collection when gravity isn't possible.
Okay.
And that's why the hybrid approach is really a great balance that takes the benefits of STEP and applies it to a system that's even more reliable for the parcels that make sense that can flow with gravity. And so it's not that our proposal with this first phase one, I believe there's 225 parcels served in phase one, 88 would be included as step connections. And so even if it expands and we get over 100 step connections, that's not necessarily going to be a problem for us because we have the reliable gravity mains to serve the project. But those individual step connections are going to be easier and more affordable for those parcels.
Okay, good. And then staying on the step connections, who pays for the solids being cleaned out, and where do those solids go? Do they go down to the treatment plant or somewhere else?
Yeah, so I'll answer this question. So the responsibility of pumping the solids would be on, while a formal policy decision by the council has not been made, and there's options available for everything. Traditionally, and what we saw with other communities, is that the tank and the responsibility of maintaining that tank and replacing that tank is completely borne by the property owner, and the maintenance activities is often performed by the utility provider for that step connection, which means in some cases a surcharge on top of the base rate for sewer service.
Okay.
Yep.
So a sewer charge on top of the base rate for just the sewer service would pay for the maintenance and operations and could potentially also include the
Pumping.
solids
Did I get that
being
right?
treated? Okay.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Well, hopefully that won't be that much money. It'll be that much money.
And you are at time.
Pardon me?
You are at time.
Oh, I have one more. You said remove the bike path. Where?
So really quick, the bike path that I meant was referring to is on the railroad extension project between Pence Road and Clark is the ultimate goal of providing a complete roadway which has amenities for motor vehicle traffic as well as bicyclists and pedestrians walking the sidewalk along this potential railroad project extension. When I said remove the bike path is in this decision, if the direction is given to re-engage with the California Transportation Commission, one of our requests to help us reduce costs and still deliver a version of the railroad project would be to have it be as bare bones and basic as possible and exclude amenities such as the bike path. While the bike path originally scoped did have a value for the bike pedestrian day-to-day use, it also has a value for an evacuation event as an additional lane. But we understand that when you're looking at railroad, think of like a traffic demand and use of Wayland Road. It's not really connecting between trip generators and trip destinations or homes and destinations. It would feel very rural, and so this scope change to remove a costly bike path is probably viable to consider to help us, really achieve the most goals as possible.
Okay, I thought you meant the existing bike path that goes
No,
up. So
yeah,
that's
no,
all.
that
So-
bike path is set in pavement. So,
Wonderful.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely won't have to keep your watch on me, so I'm quick. My name is Matt Ball. I'm District Manager for Butte County Mosquito and Vector Control District. So 3 things. First, I want to thank the committee for basically having, I think, an impromptu meeting just for our concerns at the district level. Second, the town of Paradise has never had a mosquito problem when it comes to septic, wastewater discharge facility ponds, waste treatment ponds. You guys are proposing to build one, which is going to be a mosquito breeding source. Along those lines, wherever you put man-made water, you're going to have mosquitoes. With that come a public health risk. I ask that you maintain and go on your route to do this. However, use the district as a consultatory to try to help you best design, because all I've heard all night tonight is costs. And albeit I can appreciate the lowest cost for the dollar, one thing that Paradise has yet to rebuild is its tax base. I know this because at my district, I'm still suffering from the aftermath of the Camp Fire. And I'm very sensitive to it as I was a Ridge resident for 18 years before the Camp Fire. So make sure we're involved, because the proper wastewater discharge facility can either produce a public health concern or a public health crisis, or it can be a wastewater pond that still breeds mosquitoes but is manageable by my district. I would like to help the town of Paradise make sure they're not creating any problems before they become a problem. My understanding is some of the sites that you've all visited have been told that they work just fine. Well, you heard that from the wastewater discharge manager. You didn't hear it from my point of view. About the worst design known to man is the city of Biggs. The riprap pond, I don't exactly know what it's called because I'm not a wastewater discharge guy. But the one with riprap creates mosquitoes, and it's our secondary primary vector of West Nile virus. I am very happy because after living on the ridge since 2001, before the Camp Fire, our ridge was predominantly senior citizens, which would be at risk for mosquito-borne disease for the higher, more intense forms of West Nile virus. Today, we just got confirmation that our first person in Butte County got West Nile virus, and it was a 30 to 39-year-old woman, and she's currently on an intubator. So I hope that not only costs come into this, but the public health aspects as well. We would like to be your partner throughout it. Third, this is a new project that you all are bringing in. The one thing I'm fearful of any city, county, or state agency of acquiring land and creating a water source for me means more work for me, and they put all the money into the design. What is never thought of down the road? Operating costs and maintenance. A wastewater discharge facility takes a lot of staff, a lot of expertise, a lot of training, a lot of chemicals, a lot of herbicides, and a lot of maintenance to maintain. If you don't maintain them, I can take you out to manage wetlands that the state have gobbled up by the dozens, and they no longer have funds for those, and I can show you when one property owner takes care of something and what one property owner doesn't, and how the taxpayers have to suffer for the amount of mosquitoes. So with that, thank you, and thank you for the committee for having that meeting.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Al McGree. I'm a local resident here and concerned citizen. Just a couple of questions I'd like to ask. I didn't hear as part of the presentation from Mark. Great job, by the way, Mark, as always. Do you already have an environmental consulting firm on board that prepared the prior program EIR? And is it the intent of your staff to recommend to you as council to engage their services again for this new subsequent EIR? That wasn't presented tonight. I'm just asking that question. Is that the intent?
Mr. Mayor, I can answer that question.
Yes.
So HDR is serving the town as our owner's agent, as staff augmentation, and with that comes the resources of different divisions of work. And part of the division serving the town is the environmental team with HDR.
With HDR.
They helped us prepare the original environmental impact report that was certified, and our team, stands ready to support this revised direction if that's given.
So if council, you give that direction tonight, as part of the recommendation, then that gets underway immediately, right?
Yes, that's part of action requested number 2.
Okay. I also, relative to the new EIR that's to be prepared, assuming you make this decision tonight, I strongly encourage you, amongst the alternatives looked at in that EIR, to evaluate a step system relative to the community of some type. And then lastly, this is another thing. Bear in mind, the old program EIR was tied to an older project that we had a service area, a sewer service area that was created long before the Camp Fire. You have a service area still in place. You're still using that today for this revised design system. I strongly encourage you, given the fact you're just now getting underway with the new general plan update and everything, that maybe you no longer need that large of a service area, that you might want to give some thought to changing the project description somewhat to reduce that scope and still go with your first phase, so forth, the idea of adding additional segments to that. But I really encourage you to give that some thought as part of whatever direction you adopt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike Cosentino. I'm a resident here. In the presentation, you mentioned that you're looking at several locations, but you didn't, I've never heard of a location that you're looking at specifically. Can you?
Yeah, so right now we haven't identified potential locations. That process will occur through the EIR that the previous commenter was just mentioning. We expect that to be early next year for the sites to roll out. If the direction is given, what we need to do is identify some potential sites, present those as alternatives, and then start the public comment process. But in the vicinity, Lower Skyway is an option. In the vicinity, like I mentioned, one of the commenters or meetings that we had with someone talking about the availability of land off of Clark. So there's options within there, close to town further. And so through the subsequent EIR process, we'll be able to identify those sites, engage with the community about the public impacts of what those could look like.
Would there be any consideration with the Neal Road landfill?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in that process, things like going down Neal Road could absolutely be looked at. One of the issues that, getting further out of town takes a lot of capital to reduce the number of parcels served. And so it's a balance, and will absolutely be reviewed in that EIR process for something further out of town, closer to, away from residents in the area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. I'm Melissa Schuster. Thank you so much for the work that you've done. And Mark, I echo your excitement that we are closer than we have ever been before. We truly are. I do still have some concerns and some questions. I still feel that that a full sewer system is fundamentally more than what the town needs to solve its wastewater issues. I'm concerned that this will result, I mean, I know you pulled this project together and you've got all of the answers and the estimates and all of that. I still feel that effluent only is going to be ultimately less expensive, especially with O&M. I also want to say, please, that the ad hoc committee and the town staff have been diligent in their efforts to find the best solution for Paradise, and I commend these efforts and appreciate the time that you've spent. I know that I've been spending this time along with you, doing my own studies. As the town-appointed trustee of the Butte County Mosquito and Vector Control District, thank you for looking into that. As Matt said, today was our first human West Nile virus case, and it is very concerning, particularly if we're looking at Biggs as being a model. This has been an ongoing problem with them and the mosquito issues created by that particular style of pond. So my concern is that they have looked at a number of different ways to mitigate that, and they are all very, very costly. You did mention aerated ponds. Aerated ponds, of course, require constant aeration, which is an energy use and very costly. So anyway, but I thank you for looking into those and considering those issues. Another concern is a quick Google search will show that the state is moving quickly toward mandating recycled water. The effluent-only system is, with purple pipe is something that we can accommodate that, if that is mandated in the next few years. And the added benefit of the purple pipe and effluent only with we talked about the buffer zones and potential water cannons and those types of things. Can I just finish my paragraph? It would lead to the benefit of fire safety, which in turn would lead to lower insurance rates for residents. Why wouldn't we leverage these benefits now? And of course, time is of the essence. Our town will not recover without a solution to our wastewater problem. That should not, however, be used as a threat for us to accept a system that does not fully meet all of our needs. I really commend you on the work that you've done, but I would like to see, as was mentioned earlier, that the alternatives be included in the EIR. So if we get to a point that we do need to pivot, we do need to address a state mandate on recycled water or those types of things, that we can easily do that because we've already done that background. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, my name's Brian Anderson. I did 29 years in Union Sanitary District in the Bay Area, wastewater in all phases. My question doesn't go to the design. Mine goes to after it's built. How many employees, full-time employees, and equipment costs? Where's this all going to be? So no matter what design you have, it's going to take taxpayers to pay for the employees and equipment. So have you thought about that?
I can address that question, Mr. Mayor. So at this point, what we're forecasting is operations and maintenance costs in the range of $300,000 to $800,000, and I know that's a pretty big range, with 2 to 3 employees likely required. And the O&M costs, again, starting up with a fire-affected community with less connections is a huge issue for us, and that's why I mentioned about the rate subsidy to keep rates affordable. But selecting this option assures us that is the cheapest and most affordable option to move forward and the easiest to maintain. And so with that, as we move forward with design and operations scoping, we'll be able to understand those costs a little bit better. But based on our experience in evaluating successful utilities with similar scale, we feel those costs are right on.
Yeah, you might use 2 in the ponds, but you're going to need several people for collections.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep,
So,
and equipment.
yeah, so that's a lot of full-time employees with the benefits and the vacation and all that stuff. So that's probably going to be charged to everybody in the community eventually. I mean, I don't see another way for that to happen. Is there? Because the initial ratepayers in downtown, long-term, aren't going to be able to pay for maintenance and operations.
Yeah, I can address that again, is the town is committed through formal direction and setting up what's called an operations and maintenance assistance program, where town reserves will be used to subsidize rates to keep them at a market rate level. What that looked like was about an $85 a month average monthly rate, and that's, again, doesn't consider the range between single-family residential and multifamily or commercial. And so we know there will be a range, but we do know the goal to keep it at market rate and that subsidy to continue with the goal of inducing growth and recovery and more ratepayers. And when there's more ratepayers, that there's less reliance on that subsidy.
I understand that, but that doesn't address full-time employees.
Yes.
Well,
Going forward.
yeah.
Because
So,
that's an ambiguous, we don't know yet what that looks like.
yeah, I appreciate the comment. Yeah.
Doug Munjar, resident of Paradise. Question, is Mountain Engineering still on the design install? I did not quite understand that one.
I can also address that, Mr. Mayor. The
Design
question,
build.
yeah. So the question from Doug was: is Mountain Cascade and the Carollo engineering team still under contract with the town of Paradise to help deliver this project? At this time, that contract was paused, and they have taken a backseat and not participated in this alternatives analysis process. And if direction is given to council under item 2, as part of that effort to provide direction to staff immediately commence and resume efforts, that's where we would start formally re-engaging with the Mountain Cascade and Carollo team to see their interest in continuing on the project. And then if so, what does that look like with the reduced scope? And so certainly there's options available to us, and with the goal of getting this project done as quickly as possible. And there may be potential to still utilize that contract for the collection system only, and a separate design team would need to be brought on, and a separate constructor would need to be brought on for the treatment facility.
So that would not mean that they're being put out to public bid for other contractors to bid?
For the collection system,
Yes.
if the council gave direction to utilize the existing design-build contract, it would mean that contractor and that contract would be used to construct the collection system. If there's an objective to convert the project for the collection system to design bid build, which is a more traditional method of contracting, that would open it up for more public competition.
Okay. The other one was on the purple pipe recycle. It's been brought as far as that's going to be being mandated. I don't understand where we'll be for separation, but due the fact that we went through a drought period here, the state mandated so many people not to be. We're on a limited basis of how we get our water from the rivers and snowpack. I think it's something that needs to be addressed and looked at very carefully for the town. Other question would be, being at sewer ponds, how are you going to dissipate the water other than evaporation? Can you spread it out? And you're going to have to talk to that, because I know enough different zones or locations that have sewer ponds when it comes to the winter, as we get up here, tremendous amounts of water. They've had to dump their wastewater. And we've got limited places to where we can do that due to the fact the type of ground that we live on this ridge with lava cap and everything else. I question it. Other question, when you're saying that the ratepayers that you're going to install, the 225 people will have to that hook up to it are going to be the ones that cover the cost of this. They're the ones bearing it at the initial cost. The town is going to offset the cost. That means the taxpayers of this residence are also doing it because we're paying the taxes to the town to spread that offset cost. I think that needs to be very clear about how that's being done. It may not come out individually to each lot, but if we're paying into the town as a taxpayer and resident of this, we are still paying you, the town funds that helps pay this cost to offset this system. I believe we need it, but I hope that we're designing it right for the proper side to do what you're wanting to do in the future to spread the growth. But the taxpayers need to know they are helping pay for the offset of the cost for these 225 businesses and the operation cost. Thank you.
Clarify that.
Good grief. Lower this down. Hi, Mark. Jim Riotto, a resident of the town of Paradise. This question is for Mark. First of all, your presentation is amazing. You guys must have spent a ton of time on this, and your staff should be commended. Couple of questions. How many lift stations have you guys decided on how many should be in the town of Paradise, and who's maintaining them and how much?
Yeah, I'll address this question, Mr. Mayor. As far as the first phase of the project, at this point, there are no major lift stations forecasted to be needed with the smaller phase area.
None at all?
That's correct.
What is the anticipated maintenance costs for potential lift stations?
Well, on an individual lift station, I can't say that for sure, but right now with this initial phase, we're projecting an annual cost of between $300,000 and $800,000 per year. But that number will go and become more accurate as time progresses on the design. But at this point, lift stations on the first phase are really, major lift stations because of the conversion to include STEP as part of the project scope. Major lift stations in this specific area, if I could, hang with me here on going back to this slide. Great. So the areas in orange really, and again, I'll address an earlier question about the service area, and nothing's, this is in concept. The service area can be adjusted moving forward. But in this initial area, because of the benefits of gravity, no major pump stations are forecasted,
Okay.
especially utilizing the STEP connections.
And your potential pond area, I was the resident engineer on the ones that were put in the Neal Road area, and they failed. What are you doing to prevent that type of failure in the future?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the initial discharge area is a 5-acre pond. A total need for the build out of 100,000 gallons per day looks about 17 acres. And I think one of the major priorities of the town, if the project moves forward in this fashion, is to secure enough right of way for expansion and redundancy. And that's certainly possible with this alternative. But finding the land to do it in an appropriate manner is absolutely a challenge. And so that's part of the EIR process that will take place in here in a couple months.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yep. Thank you, Jim.
Anyone else? Okay, we're going to close public comment. And we're... What's that? Go.
Okay.
Yeah.
3 minutes. Oh, golly, I've got too many questions for 3 minutes. But anyways, yeah, I'm Ron Lasan, one of the council members. And first question I have for you, Mark, is there other, it switches on, it's put in. You hearing me? All right, Mike's dead.
Ron, can maybe try one of your peers' mics to see if those work?
No, yours works. Yeah, again, Ron Lasan, yeah, that works.
Perfect.
First question, Mark, is there other examples of a hybrid system here in California that works, and were you able to visit one of those?
Yeah, one of the stops we went to was North Auburn, where the community we visited was entirely STEP, and their project discharged to a gravity main that was ultimately treated at the regional facility in Lincoln. So that's the Midwestern Placer Regionalization Project. That was one of the models we were looking at for regionalization here in Paradise. But there, they had a community STEP, and they went over the pros and cons and the challenges and provided a great experience and allowed us to really be thoughtful about the commitment to take the best of STEP and apply it to this project, and also understand that STEP connections are easily discharged to a gravity main to reach a centralized treatment facility.
Okay. Second question is, and you touched on it briefly, I just want to confirm it. At full build-out, will we need more than that 17 acres? And have you factored that into the EIR to look for those areas that you may have to expand into?
Yeah, great clarifying question, because full build-out of the first phase is the 17 acres at 100,000 gallons per day. The initial startup flow is about 40,000 gallons per day.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about what is full build-out, we heard that question come up about the service area. Additional land would be needed to apply for different ponds, or we could repurpose and increase our treatment facilities to have a higher level of treatment, look at beneficial reuse, and repurpose some of those ponds to help kind of perform some of the front-end work or back-end work of the processes for a larger service area. But at this point, the 17 acres is inclusive of the full build-out of the first phase, which accounts for properties that exist today that are fully developed and properties that exist today and that are just land.
Okay. And the reason, audience, reason I'm asking the question is I'm not on the sewer ad hoc committee. I'm on the walkable downtown, and I'll tell you now, we are absolutely dependent on having a sewer to get businesses back in our downtown area. If you drive out there today, you'll see we got nice roads, they have got landscaping in, and there's not been any new buildings other than Barney O'Rourke's in that area have come back since the fire. So we've got to have a sewer system, whatever it is. And on the comment about the ratepayers paying question, let me tell you right now, we're deficit spending every year. Okay, the taxpayers are not paying the full freight on the cost of running this town. 2/3 of the amount of the money goes to fire and police, and I know you guys don't want us to cut that. So we are taking money out of our fire victim trust every year to pay that offset. And so without the sewer system in, we won't get a walkable downtown and businesses, which we're going to hopefully get more tax money off of that. And that's going to draw more residents up here. So it's a synergism between businesses and rooftops, for people that'll get us to where we can pay our own way. But we eventually will run out of the money out of the Fire Victims Trust. And so we're very cognizant of that, and that's the reason for the speed that I'm asking for in the sewers, so we can go out and market ourselves to businesses to fill out the downtown, so we can depend on that for paying the full fare rather than having to take it out of the Fire Victims Trust money. And that's the last of my questions.
Our settlement is not out of the Fire Victims Trust money.
Okay, well, settlement, excuse me. Yeah, I misspoke. There's a settlement, the town was separate from the Fire Victims Trust, but it's because of the fire we have that money, and we're using that to pay about half, a little bit more than half of the yearly cost right now to run this town. So we've got to do this sewer, and we've got to get it sooner rather than later, and we've got to encourage businesses to come here so we can eventually pay our own way. Thank you.
I have two questions. Since we happen to have Clint Snyder here from the Water Board, can you speak to the couple of comments on the potential mandate for water reclamation?
Sure. What I will say with regard to recycle reclamation, the State Water Board currently has a recycle reclamation policy. It's a little bit like the Central Valley Water Board's regionalization policy in that when a wastewater treatment plant is looking at the expansion or alternatives that they consider recycle and reuse.
Sure.
Certainly, there's been times when we've gone into a drought type of situation and those pressures increase, but currently right now there just aren't any mandates for a new wastewater treatment plant like yours to come online and provide, that level of treatment.
Okay. Thank you. And I don't mean to ask that to minimize that that is a priority of ours. We just need to get this delivered, and then we can work towards something like that. My second question is to Mark. If you can clarify Mr. Munjar's comment, just to reiterate where the rate subsidies will be funded from, not from the taxpayers.
Yes. At some point after the settlement agreement between the Town of Paradise and PG&E, the town has set up what's called the Paradise Recovery and Operations Fund. Part of that fund does help support the operations of the town, and then of that fund, 10% was set aside as a project reserve. Of that project reserve is about 19 million, and of that 19 million, the 6.46 million, I believe, was set aside for the first 10 years to fund this project, or the rate subsidy, excuse me.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. There's so many things. I mean, I appreciate the work everybody did. I appreciate the fact that we included PID and the water board and people on the committee. I think that's really important. I know that PID operates a wastewater treatment plant at the water treatment plant because they have a byproduct from treating our drinking water that can't be put down into Butte Creek. So they have personnel on staff right now that do that, which is one of the reasons, as well as the fact that 2 of their board members have operated treatment plants in the past, that I've been advocating for, and we have included them in our committee. I know that if everything looks like it's doable and will live beyond its implementation, that they're willing to get involved to be a partner in not only constructing it, but doing it. I have a few concerns, though. I really, I'm so tired of road work and the quality of life in our town as a result of it, with the promise of, someday it's going to be wonderful. To look forward to another 3 or 4 or 5 years of that is just daunting. I understand I've always been an advocate for the sewer. I was on the council from 2004 to 2016 when we wrestled with this, and we're now looking at the phase 1. When this thing grew, I remember when this whole thing grew into this gigantic town-wide idea. And we have these people that we have a contract with that when we were directed to regionalize and go to Chico, spent $9 or $10 million or $7 million or a bunch of money. And we worked for 3 or 4 or 5 years to develop a plan to, in the 11th hour, be told, wait a minute, it's going to be $400 million, where the whole thing was just not even doable. So I have concerns about how can I believe any of these numbers that I'm being given now, And I certainly, going forward, number one, I support having a sewer. I understand all the economic reasons for it. But, and it would be great to get it done as soon as possible and all of that. But I would certainly, I like the comments that were made about including the EIR to look at some other alternatives. To Doug's comment, he's right. I've asked this question. And when I'm being told at this point, when I'm being asked to approve the redistribution of funds and all this other stuff, well, we don't really know what it's going to cost the ratepayer. I mean, I live on Social Security. I have a septic system that works. To Liza's question about, well, if I have a septic tank and it works, what are my costs to hook up this little pump to get into the sewer thing or something? I mean, there's so many unanswered things, and it's like, well, we won't know until we do a design or get to the next phase. And
that in the report that he gave, in August 8th of 2023, when I was back on the council, the town council conceptually put aside 10% of our pro fund, of our PG&E. PG&E gave the town of Paradise $200 and some million. And we've been using that, and the original plan was invest it, and it would last us 25 years because we didn't have a tax base. We didn't have a way to pay the policeman or the fireman or Mark or anybody else to do anything. And so, you know, we put that money aside and we had a plan, and if we spent $9 million a year to run our town, we would last for 25 years, and at the end of that time, we would have $60 million, a bunch of money left. And so we've said, well, let's put 10% away that we're not going to spend getting through the next 25 years. And on this August 8th meeting, it was presented to the council to, well, look, maybe we should do this and put this another 10% aside for some future sewer thing. So that's what we did. So we conceptually locked up some money out of that big pile of money for this idea. Well, and my question in the beginning of this, when I first saw a committee report, was, so what happens in year 11? You know, if you have a septic system that's working now, you pay $35 or $38 a year for a permit with the town. If every 7 years you got to have it inspected, it's $300 or $400. If you got to have it pumped, it's $700. If we build these ponds in this treatment plant, will the septic pumpers in town that pump all of the other people? I mean, as a resident, I would never hook up to this system if my annual cost goes from $35 a year to $85 a month. I mean, I just don't understand how people do. Maybe a big restaurant, you know, but so I have, those are my concerns. I'm all for the sewer. There are some things of what we're being asked. If we're going to, part of this resolution is that I would go with what Doug was saying. Let's go back out to bid. Let's get a new town agent of record. Let's get a new design build team. Let's let people out there, because I know the committee told me that in some of the jurisdictions they talked to, they recommended to them consultants that were very helpful with them designing and building their treatment plant. So those are just the kind of concerns I have. Because in year 11 or in year 12 or in year 15, and if you ever do expand this thing, I don't understand how any resident will hook up to it. But what's it going to cost then? What happens when we aren't going to have that pro fund someday? And that someday is not that far away. Someday that's not going to be there. So then it is on the taxpayers. Then it will become a general fund. Or you'll be asked to vote for another sales tax increase. Or you'll be asked to vote for creating a sewer assessment district or something, because the numbers don't work out, you know. So I don't know. I mean, I'm struggling with this. Yes, we need a sewer to bring in development, but I think I want a brand new group of people to be involved. I think Al kind of alluded to that.
Mark, you want to address that?
Well, I'm not sure where to start, but I want to make sure that we're clear on what we're talking about. Is that the intent of the project is to ensure the successful recovery of Paradise, to regenerate tax base, to have a thriving community with essential services in Paradise, not down the hill or anywhere else. And without a sewer, we can guarantee that our goals and objectives for a thriving community will not be achieved. Mm-hmm. Second, you stated that, you know, funds have been set aside out of a settlement, and I want to really be clear about that because there's two reserves. One is 10% for projects that was approved by the majority of the council, and a second is a 10% emergency reserve that was also approved by the council. What we are proposing for a rate subsidy, which is $6.46 million out of $20 million, is to help us bridge the gap. Because if we don't bridge the gap and you'd like to see a sewer constructed, there's no way this project is affordable for the community. And so when we look at what happens when year 10 is over and the 6.46 million, and we estimate the recovery of ratepayers coming online to join a monthly rate and contribute to the successful recovery of Paradise, that subsidy would go down, but obviously costs go up. And so ultimately, the community and the council has to consider is investing in our recovery a worthwhile endeavor. And if we choose not to, we don't have to do this project. There will be no impacts to businesses, and once these roads are paved, they will be smooth. But we will not have a sewer.
I'm not suggesting we don't go forward with it. I'm saying, so what I said was real clear. And that whole hocus pocus about, yeah, let's put aside this other money. I remember when it was asked for. There was this emergency fund that was going to be set there. And I'm not saying I'm opposed to doing the subsidy, but at some point that money's gone. And 17 acres, I mean, you're going to run into, I believe you're going to run into some things when you do your EIR and you try to locate some septic ponds in a treatment plant somewhere on the lower sky. I think there's a lot of things we're going to run into. And we don't have the money to do that beyond whatever. And all of these numbers aren't even real. I mean, I don't know that they're real, you know?
Well, I'd like to address that too, if you don't mind. The efforts that were made in previous iterations, I want to point out that local engineering firms estimated in 2012 that we could have done the full service area for about $28 to $60 million. Okay? And then the more we learn about this project and different teams that come on board, they provided different numbers. And the cost continues to go up, and what it continues to be proven is that these costs and these projects don't get cheaper as time progresses. So in 2020, when the town hired HDR to help support the project and determine a real-world post-campfire, what's it going to take to get regionalization done, they did a great job with the information that they had at the time, and the team working on that is, to be honest, not the same team working on the project today. And this council provided direction to continue and use creative contracting to look at design build, to again, find a contractor, not an engineer necessarily, to understand what's it cost to actually build it for a price that they will build it with profit included. That is a much different conversation. And so what we did is we brought on one of the finest teams that I've ever worked with, that is universally respected into the industry, and have great people working to provide updated estimates. I do not see estimates that are higher than previous teams and previous versions with less information, saying that a project is higher as a failure, because we know more. And using design build behind the system of creating these new estimates and revised project with this team is 100% good, solid information. Nobody wants to end up in a similar situation of what we've been through, where costs increase and funding goes down. But I can guarantee that this is a very sound estimate, conservatively high, conservatively accurate. And the best and most efficient way to deliver this project is to make sure we do it as quickly as possible. And that can mean using the existing team or not. But if you choose, to provide direction to hire different teams, what that equates to is time, onboarding, and you could potentially lose momentum and create different issues. And lastly, I want to address, risk moving forward. Building a local wastewater treatment plant is not easy and is not recommended lightly. And that is why we followed the recommendation to try and regionalize first, because regionalization guarantees certainty. There is an existing wastewater treatment facility down the hill. There is the Sacramento River to discharge to. But we understand that that is not viable. So we have reformed and reformulated the most affordable, smallest version of this project at the lowest price possible that is conservatively estimated high. And I'm not sure if I've missed any other points to address, but yeah.
So if I could chime in. So we're talking about hooking up houses. If I have a house that has a septic that works, I'm obviously not going to hook up to this. I mean, why would I? If I have a system that works and it's not failed me, there's no issue, don't hook up to it. We're doing this for commercial. This is a commercial situation to bring in and get people interested in coming in and being a part of our downtown. And our business along Clark and Pearson too. So, you're not going to hook up if you have a system in your house that works. Doug knows how much those systems cost per house. And the only reason I'd ever hook up a house to it is if I got there and I could hook up before I had paid him to put my system in. Then it would make more sense. But moving forward, I have 2 projects that have step systems, 2 commercial buildings. And one of them burned up, so now I got one. It works great. It's a good system. I like it. It's not cheap, and it's not something that, it's not cheap at all. It's not something that, there's monitoring that goes on, there's constant, monitoring of the floats and pumps and all that kind of stuff, so it costs, but it works. It works good. If I could go gravity, I would go gravity in a heartbeat. Trust me, that would be so simple and make my life so easy if I could do that, but I couldn't. So I'm in a step system situation. So they're good. I like the hybrid part. Go gravity where you can. Do gravity where you can. I think that's great. It makes sense. We live on a hill. It works for us. Let's use it. The step is great too for where we can't, but it's not cheap and it isn't inexpensive. So trust me, if you want to pay my bills, you can find out for yourself. I'll be willing to let you do that. People come to me and ask, they go, how much would a 2,500 or 3,000 square foot house cost to build? I don't know anything. What does the house look like? What do you have on the house? What's inside the house? We got to ask a whole bunch. We got to do all this, and then you just give them this estimate, a range. It's going to be somewhere in here because you haven't picked out your selections. We don't know what this is going to cost until we start developing what this is going to look like. You can't nail those things down until you have a plan. I can't nail it down when I'm building a house until I have a plan or a commercial building. Then I can start nailing it down and get down to the exact numbers. We got to get through to this point. To me, this is a no-brainer. We have to do it. We have to move forward. This has got to happen, and we've got to get to the point we understand where the costs are. Let's deal with that when we get there. Let's talk about that then, when we know more. We don't know nothing other than a conceptual idea. Someone walking into me saying, I want a house. Okay, what am I going to do with that? I don't know what to do. So that's where we're at. We need to move forward. That's my suggestion, but anyway, just wanted to throw that out.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and so do I want to move forward. My concern is, and I understand that. I'm not stupid. We don't, till we get all these other things figured out. I just have lost confidence in the people we used prior that being recommended that we continue to use. It's like, that's just that's where my struggle is. I'm not anti-sewer, I'm not anti, doing all of this stuff, but it's just that I just don't have confidence in that. How do I know what happened to us last October won't happen again a year from now when the EIR is completed?
Well, I sat out there, so I'm the new guy up here. This is kind of new for me. I sat out there and watched the whole thing. This is there's no comparison with that system to this system.
I understand, but
this is a lot more controlled system than what we had before, what you were designing before.
But the people giving us the numbers and doing the work are the ones that missed it on the last one.
They gave you a range. We've all blown those situations before. I can attest to that. But I'm not throwing them under the bus for that. But that's my thoughts.
So are we ready to make a motion?
My question is, what do we What all are we trying to answer? I mean, he listed several things. Are we asked to do the funds reallocation here, or is that something in the future?
So at this point, the action requested tonight is to adopt the resolution selecting alternative one as it's written here as the direction to move forward. With that, we're asking for you to provide direction to immediately commence and resume efforts to advance the project forward, looking at means to advance the environmental and design as quickly and most efficient as possible. Last, you're providing direction for us to engage with our funding partners to really speak to the weight of this decision. Very, very challenging. You're weighing global priorities, and it's not to be taken lightly. So with that, we're looking for direction to hear from you that is important to supplement this project with $36.7 million of CDBG-DR. And with that, one of our jobs, if you give that direction, will to then bring back a formal document that can amend that allocation plan and have a better understanding of the impacts and the potential for us to retain the $33 million with the California Transportation Commission without just assuming it has to be deobligated.
Resolution number what?
67.
Here's the issue I'm having with the recommendation on the reallocation. I've been the one that's been championing most the Oliver Curve, but others know the issue with the Oliver Curve, okay? I have a concern that as we add more children in that area, we're going to have more of them either walking, riding their bike, or their scooter up there, and it's a safety issue. And I get the fact that we don't want to give up the 33 million, because that's also safety, but you're asking me to postpone Oliver Curve and just take the risk that we aren't going to kill anybody on that road between now and whenever we can ever find funding for that, for building, retaining the 33 million of LCAP funds so we can build a road there, phase 2 there, so that we don't have people die on the next campfire. So you give me a Hobson's choice of trying to decide, well, who do I want to spend the money on now for the kids or later for a potential fire? And I'm having a hard time making that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to clarify that the decision on that will be brought back at a future meeting.
Okay.
And so that's not for tonight, and we absolutely understand the value and importance, of the Oliver Curve project. I used to live shortly off of Oliver. I've seen the issues. It remains a priority for us. We've applied for grant funds numerous times. And so the decision tonight is to direction that we are interested in reallocating 36.7 to the sewer, and then staff will bring back options for you to consider about what to do with the remainder of the funds to try and retain the 33 million, deliver a project on row, or to come up with some other option that it delivers Oliver Curve or other priorities that are on the town's approved project list.
So this resolution it's one resolution with 3 parts to it, right?
Yes.
So there's not this, and if we approve this, we won't be going out to bid for it. We're just going to use the same team we have. That's part of this.
So what the resolution is, adopting the ad hoc committee's recommendation for alternative 1. That's the resolution.
Okay.
And then we're looking for consensus for staff to immediately commence and resume efforts to advance the project forward through environmental and design activities. And then we're looking for direction to engage our funding partners to reallocate funds accordingly. As far as the contractual decisions that need to come forward, we're open to taking direction. But for the purposes of what item 2 says, it assumes that we are going to continue to partner with our support systems to deliver the environmental document, to re-engage Mountain Cascade and Carrillo to determine their willingness and feasibility to help us deliver a revised project scope, including a smaller service area. And so that's what's included in option 2. I do really want to be clear, at some point we have to secure a designer, a new designer, or potentially a new competition for a new designer for the treatment facility because it was not initially included in the scope of work.
And I do have a question though, Mark, and I see what you're saying, but item 2 does not say anything about going back to Mountain Cascade or Corolla, unless I'm missing something.
No, at this point, what we're asking through item 2 is for us to continue work. We paused everything for this alternatives analysis. It was a costly endeavor, but an absolute worthwhile endeavor, and it's cost the project 7 months of progress. But moving forward, item 2, and I appreciate the opportunity to clarify, assumes that we continue to use forward the teams available to us that want to support the project as quickly as possible. It took, for reference, in procuring work that is reimbursable through these complex funding programs easily can take 8 to 10 months. And that type of delay at this point is really not viable for this project. Our window is now, and moving forward on the support system of delivering the environmental and finding out what is possible with the existing contract on design build. That's all we're asking. And then as far as if the committee wants to weigh in on future meetings or have the council bring back future decision points on the construction side, those are absolutely alternatives that we can bring back.
But the contract with Carrillo and them is for design build, right? So that would include construction.
Yes, it does have provisions, though, for us to off-ramp into different mechanisms. So we could, the design-build contract could convert to design only and then design-bid-build.
Yeah, it's difficult because we didn't have an alternative plan. And so now it's about timing. Oh, Jesus, we can't get somebody. We were unhappy with what's happened to us in the past in this whole sewer project thing. And even though everything is different now. So now we have a committee and now we have an alternative plan. But now it's a timing issue. Jesus, we cannot afford to get a new team to look at it because that'll take 6 to 8 months or 10 months or whatever. So, it's kind of like I don't really have a choice. I can express my unhappiness with the consulting teams that we've been engaged with for the last 5, 6 years because of what happened with that whole endeavor. And so I'm really between a rock and a hard place because I'm not anti-sewer, and I understand what Greg's saying and everything. So I just want to make that statement for the record.
Woody, I would like to also just add that this time we are meeting with these engineers and everybody involved in this project on an extremely frequent basis. And, I know I'm not a sewer expert or a wastewater expert, but I've certainly learned quite a bit and asked plenty of questions and have added a little bit more of a layer of accountability to the process. And so we are looking at it much more closely this time along the way and not just, taking things at a glance and taking words at their face value.
Well, I think that's the reason we made a committee so that the council would be more informed because we just rely on staff to come. They meet together, they have their meetings, and then we get told things occasionally. But, I think that like the fellow from the mosquito district, I think maybe we need to expand some. We certainly need to partner up with everybody that's going to have to be involved because there's so many unanswered questions going down the road. So it's just, I know we need it. I know I'm going to have to vote yes on it, but I struggle, and I want to be completely transparent and honest with the community. I'm not the only one. There's 5 of us sitting up here that were elected by you, and when we got the whole report about the drastic change in cost of going to the treatment plant, none of us were happy, and we just never had a meeting to get consensus until staff fire everybody and let's start new, So, I don't know. So, okay, I'll quit beating a dead horse.
Do I have a motion?
I would like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 2025-67, identifying Alternative 1, and provide direction to staff to immediately move forward in that direction, and to also provide direction to staff to bring back revisions to our CDBG-DR infrastructure plan to consider.
I'll second.
Motion by Lang, seconded by Lasan. Councilmember Boland.
Aye.
Councilmember Colleton.
Aye.
Councilmember Lang.
Aye.
Councilmember Lasan.
Aye.
And Mayor Carter.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, with that, thank you, everybody, and meeting adjourned.
And we're going to get a sewer.